Dear student, I hope you are fine and healthy. Today, I would like to talk on communitarianism. So, I will introduce to you what is communitarianism. So, after the end of this class lecture, you will be able to understand what is communitarianism and the criticism, the communitarian critics of the individualist conception of the self, and then you will also understand the communitarian critics of the idea of state neutrality. First, my dear student, since the 1980s, the theory of liberal individualism has found its most distinctive and rigorous challenge and critique in what has been labeled as communitarianism. The term communitarian was first elicited by Michael Sandel in his work Liberalism and the Limits of Justice, that was published in the year 1982, in which he developed a critique of the liberal individualist foundations of John Rawls' theory of liberal justice. Some of the other communitarian critics of liberal individualism are Alice Dyle, Michael, and Charles Taylor. These communitarian thinkers are highly inspired by two persons. They are Hegel and Rousseau. Now, communitarians are the first and foremost concerned with community. Two or more people constitute a community when they share a common perception of good and see this good as partly constitutive of their identity or selves. Such a constitutive community may be a close friendship, family relationship, neighborhood, or even a comprehensive political community. Dear student, communitarians insist that each of us individuals develop our identity, talents, and pursuit in life only in the context of the community. We are by nature social beings. So, since the community determines and shapes the individual nature, political life must start with a concern for the community and not the individual. In other words, the locus of philosophical concern in reflecting on the ideals that the just state must be the community and not the individual. Now, the main fall of liberal individualism, according to communitarian thinkers, is then that it is mistakenly and irreparably individualistic. The liberal conception of the relationship between the individual and the state is, according to the communitarian, unduly limited as well as misrepresentative of the true nature of society. In the communitarian view, it is not enough to think in terms of two-level relationship with the individual at one level and the state at the others. Groups and communities occupy an immediate position between the individuals and the state and should be included among the kinds of rights and duty bearing units whose interrelationship are explored. So, the students, according to communitarians, by emphasizing rights and freedom of individuals over society, liberal individualism neglects the importance of community membership and identity to social and political life. It ignores what the extent to which the society or community in which people shapes who they are and values they have. So, dear student, although communitarians critics focus on different aspects of liberal individualism, it is possible to identify some of the themes and arguments such as the critics of the liberal individualist conception of self and its understanding of the nature and function of the state. So uh, I will also speak on the communitarian critics of liberal individualism with reference to these arguments. So first, the two main limitations of individualism. Now, communitarians points to main two limitation of the what liberal individualist understanding of the self as detached and separate from social ends. First is it devalues, discounts and downgrades the importance of the community, and secondly it presupposes a defective conception of the relation between the self and its ends. So the student, regarding the first criticism, the communitarianism challenges liberal individualism for downgrading and discounting the importance of the community, and more specifically for ignoring the extent to which it is the society or the community which people live in that shape who they are and the value they have. So individualism understands people to be self-sufficient outside of society and not in need of any community context in order to what develop and exercise their capacities to self determination. In other words, individualism doesn't recognize the importance of community membership in shaping a good life for the individual. Dear student, for communitarianism, the community is a fundamental and irreplaceable ingredient in the good life of the person. However, resilience and independence people may be human existing outside social and community life is unthinkable. People, according to the communitarians, are not Robinson Crusoes able to live in complete and permanent isolation. Rather, individuals are what constituted uh, and their identity shaped by the community to which they belong. We as human beings are essentially members of a family, religious tribe, race, and nation, essence, rather than being distinct from social and community ends and values. We have a history and are placed in specific social circumstances. The attachments and the moral engagements from this common community membership determines who we are and shape the value we have. Communitarians therefore criticize liberal individualism for producing a particular conception of self which is divorced from the social reality that constitutes it. And secondly, the second criticism is that communitarianism criticizes individualism for holding a mistaken or a false understanding of the relationship between the individuals and self and its ends. As uh, I have already said, individualism understands the self to be prior to its ends, in the sense that individuals reserve the right to question, revise, and reject their most deeply held convictions about the nature of good life. If they are, if when these are found to be no longer worth pursuing. So, according to communitarianism, to accept this understanding of self is to set oneself as this embodied, unencumbered, and sharing a voluntary relationship with one's social ends attachment. They oppose the voluntaristic pictures of the relationship between the self and its ends assumed by individualism. According to them, These pictures ignores the way we are embedded or situated and partially constituted by social roles and community membership. So now let's talk on the communitarian critics of the idea of state neutrality. Now, the other main focus of communitarian critics of liberal individualism is the later understanding of the natures and functions of the state. So, as we have already talked about, the liberal individualists characterize the state as a minimal and neutral political authority whose functions are limited to protection of individual rights and maintenance of law and order. Since individuals are free, rational, and capable of self-determination, the primary value is political order. According to individualism, ought to be, neutrality of the state. As already said, a neutral state is one that is not committed to any particular conception of the goods and remain equidistant from intolerance of or conceptions of the goods. So, dear student, communitarians oppose this connection between individual self-determination and state neutrality. According to them, the views that the state should be value neutral and individuals should be free to make their own choices stems from an atomistic belief that autonomy is protected only when judgments about the good's life are taken out of political realms and made on an individual basis. Rejecting such atomism, communitarians argue that in reality, individual judgments require what sharing of experiences, the gives and take of collective deliberation and collective evaluation of shared practices. So, in other words, individual choices about good life can only be exercised in a particular sort of community and not a cultural marketplace guided by what? Freedom and neutrality of the type granted by liberal individualism. So, dear student, the communitarian perspective therefore argues for abandonment of liberal neutrality in favor of politics of the common good. Communitarian conceive of the common good as a substantive conception of good life that defines the community way of life rather than being neutral to different individual conceptions of good life. The common good provide standard by which individual preferences and values are evaluated. So, in other words, the common good forms the basis on which individual conceptions of good are ranked, and the weight given to an individual's conception depends on how much it conforms or contribute to the common good. So, that's all for today, and we shall continue with other topics. Please keep in touch. Thank you very much.